Hi everyone, I'm Madam Tawa here. In this video, you're going to learn about Chapter 2 Cellular Respiration. There are a total of 6 learning outcomes for this chapter. However, you're going to learn about 3 subtopics only for this week lesson. Principles of cellular respiration, respiration as an oxidation reduction process, and structure and function of ATP. So at the end of this lesson, you should be able to define the principle of cellular respiration, explain respiration as an oxidation reduction process, describe the structure and function of ATP. Living cells need energy to undergo the growth and development, transport and movement. So how they get energy? Some animals, they get energy by eating the plants. Some animals, they feed on other organisms that they eat plants. So how the energy flows into an ecosystem? In the form of the sunlight, and also it will leave the ecosystem in the form of heat. So first, the sunlight energy absorbed by the plants to undergo the photosynthesis process to release the organic molecules and oxygen. Then the living cells use the chemical energy that's stored inside the organic molecules and oxygen to carry out the cellular respiration in mitochondria to generate ATP and release the carbon dioxide and water molecule. So the carbon dioxide and water used up by the plants together with the sunlight energy to undergo the photosynthesis process. A cell requires oxygen to break down the glucose molecule or the organic molecules in cellular respiration. Therefore, cellular respiration is an aerobic process. Respiration requires a cell to exchange two gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide, between inside of the body and surrounding environment. So how the gases exchange takes place? Through the breathing process, the oxygen enter inside of the body, and then after the oxygen used up by the cell to undergo the cellular respiration, the carbon dioxide release and exhale out of the body through the breathing process. Therefore, breathing and the cellular respiration are closely related. The cellular respiration takes place inside the mitochondria. Okay. The first subtopic is the basic principle of cellular respiration. So the cellular respiration is a complex process in which the organic molecules or the food molecules such as glucose are broken down to generate the chemical energy that's stored in the chemical bond of the ATP. So based on the formula, you can understand that the glucose oxidizes to release the carbon dioxide, and then the oxygen reduced to release the water molecule. So when the glucose broken down, the electrons are transferred from the glucose to the oxygen. So the transfer of the electron cause energy release. So actually the energy release composed of ATP and heat. So the ATP energy synthesized from the released energy. So this is how the cells extract the ATP energy. Second subtopic is cellular respiration as oxidation and reduction reaction. Okay, oxidation and reduction reaction means redox reaction. So in redox reaction, there is transfer of electron between the reactants. Okay, in oxidation, the substance or the reactants lost electrons or oxidize. So if there is a loss of electrons, there is loss of hydrogen atom. In reduction process, a substance or the reactants gain electrons or reduced. So it means the substance gain hydrogen atom also. So let's we look at the example. Okay, the first reduced compound A. So reduced compound A means the compound must have electron. So the reduced compound A undergo the oxidation process by lost the electrons to become as a oxidized compound A. However, the oxidized compound B. So oxidized means the compound B lost the electron. So the oxidized compound B gain electron to reduce to become reduced compound B. So this is another example you can have a look about the oxidation and reduction process. So here when you saw from the equation, the sodium before the reaction, sodium atom, and then after the reaction, you can see here positively charged. So the positive charge here represents that there is loss of electron. And then the chlorine atom, after the reaction, the negative charges here represents that the chlorine atom gain electron and undergo the reduction process. So the sodium undergo the oxidation process by lost the electrons to become positively charged sodium ion, and then the chlorine atom undergo the reduction process by gain the electron to become the chloride ion. Okay, this is the equation for the cellular respiration. So now you relate the oxidation and reduction process to the cellular respiration formula. So the glucose oxidized to become carbon dioxide, right? So here you can see there is hydrogen atom, but after the reaction, there is no hydrogen atom. So it represents loss of hydrogen atom and loss of electron. So the glucose undergo oxidation process to become carbon dioxide. However, the oxygen undergo the reduction process to become water molecule. So there is gain of hydrogen atom. So there is gain of electron. So when the glucose oxidized to become carbon dioxide and then the oxygen reduced to become water, okay, the electrons from the glucose transfer to the oxygen. So the transfer of the electron cause release of the energy. So the energy composed of ATP and heat. So the ATP energy is actually synthesized from the energy. So as I mentioned here, when there is loss of hydrogen atom, there is loss of electron. So it means the electron travel with a hydrogen atom or proton. Electron carriers such as NAD positive. In cellular respiration, the glucose or any other organic molecules are broken down in a series of steps. So it means the electrons not directly transfer from glucose to oxygen. It involves series of steps in which the electron carriers embedded in a series of the steps. So NAD positive is actually a coenzyme and act as an electron carrier or acceptor during cellular respiration. So NAD positive is reduced to become NADH. Once the NADH lost electron, the NADH will undergo the oxidation process and oxidize back to NAD positive and then become available once again as a carrier. So this is the structure of NAD positive and this is the structure of NADH. So once the NADH pass the electrons to the electron transport chain in cellular respiration, the electron transport chain pass the electron in a series of the steps until reach the oxygen. So actually the oxygen pull the electrons down the electron transport chain. So once the oxygen accept the electron, the oxygen undergo the reduction process and then to produce the water molecule. So from here you can see clearly. So once the oxygen accept the electron with hydrogen atoms, the oxygen reduced to become water molecule. So the cellular respiration is a exergonic reaction. There are two common electron carriers involved in cellular respiration, such as NAD positive and FAD. So both of the electron carriers are derived from vitamin. NAD positive derived from vitamin B3 and FAD derived from vitamin B2. The third subtopic is structure and function of ATP. So ATP means the high energy molecule that store and transport the energy within the cells. So the cells get the ATP energy to carry out all the biochemical reaction. So the ATP power up the cellular work by coupling exergonic reaction to endergonic reaction. So this is the structure of ATP. ATP made up by three components such as nitrogenous base such as adenine, 5 carbon sugar such as ribose, and then 3 phosphate group. So actually the chemical bonds within the 3 phosphate groups are the high energy bonds. So how do we get energy from ATP? By breaking the high energy bonds between the last two phosphates in ATP through hydrolysis process. So this is the bond will break during the hydrolysis process. So hydrolysis process must involve the addition of the water. So the ATP adenosine triphosphate initially have 3 phosphate. So once undergo the hydrolysis, the chemical bond between last two phosphate break down and then cause release of ADP and inorganic phosphate. Okay, next we look at the mechanisms to generate the ATP. There are three mechanisms. First, substrate level phosphorylation. So the inorganic phosphate release from the substrate and then phosphorylate the ADP to become the ATP. The next mechanism is oxidative phosphorylation, energy from food. So the food is oxidized and then the energy is extracted from the electron by the electron transport chain. So the extracted energy is then used to make the ATP. The third mechanism is photophosphorylation, the energy from sunlight. So the plants use the light energy to generate the electrons. Then the energy extracted from the electrons by an electron transport chain. So the extracted energy is the one used to make the ATP energy. So how the ATP performs work? Once the ATP broken down, it gives off the energy to power up the chemical work. Okay, next, the importance or the functions of the ATP. Uh, the first function is movement. Movement is a type of the mechanical work. So the energy required for the movement of the cilia, flagella, muscle contraction, and movement of chromosomes during cell division. Next, anabolic process. Anabolic process is a type of chemical process. Anabolic process or endergonic reaction, the reactants, they need ATP energy. Third, secretion. Secretion is one type of the mechanical work. So in the cell, the packing and transport of secretory product or the secretory vesicle need the energy. Fourth, active transport. Active transport is one type of the transport work. So some of the ions or the substance, they cannot cross the plasma membrane. So the active transport need energy to move the substance across the plasma membrane against their concentration gradient. So this is the ATP cycle. So initially, once the chemical bonds between last two phosphate broken down to release the energy, the ATP undergo the hydrolysis process to release the inorganic phosphate and adenosine diphosphate. So during hydrolysis process, the energy release. So this energy is used up by the cells to carry out the endergonic reaction or anabolism. Next, the ADP phosphorylate to become ATP. So for this phosphorylation process, ADP need energy. So they get the energy from the catabolism or exergonic reaction because the exergonic reaction release energy. So that energy used up to phosphorylate the ADP to become ATP. So generally, cellular respiration is a metabolic pathway, specifically catabolism and exergonic reaction. So in which the glucose oxidize or break down into carbon dioxide and water. So from one glucose molecule can yield 30 to 32 ATP. There are three stages of cellular respiration such as glycolysis, Krebs cycle or citric acid cycle, and oxidative phosphorylation. So in next lesson, we will learn in depth about the stages of cellular respiration. So that's all from me. Thank you.